my name is Babar Amin. So I always tell people it's like the fishing barber, and then everybody remembers it. Uh, Even though it's not spelled like that. But so Babar Amin. I work for Anetac. Anetac is a identity vulnerability company, right? We have an identity vulnerability platform. That means we discover, monitor, and help you respond to identity vulnerabilities. And I am the chief product officer, which means that I'm responsible for our product. So, um, so white space is basically clean, right? So clutter versus non-clutter, or information density. Even when you have a large amount of information, being able to present it, right? Apple has this concept, or John Ivy had this concept of macro white space and micro white space, right? So macro white space is lots of empty space, floating things that are in the middle, versus micro white space where you can have a lot of information, but each piece of information is separated, right? You have to think 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 that you're giving everything its own space, and you're not crowding things together, right? So use of monospace font even, right? Because then uh, like look at how Porsche, right? The Porsche font, how Porsche writes their logo, and or not their logo, but the word Porsche, and it's very monospace, right? But it's clean. It's not getting all fancy and weird and cute, right? It's just clean. It doesn't. Don't get me started on design. Well, actually, maybe you should get me started on, or sorry, on color. On color. So color is another one of my, like, I don't make the dashboard or the screen look like a Christmas tree, right? You do not have to use every single color in the palette. So I always tell people, like, if you are using more than three colors, right, you're gonna have to put a legend somewhere. If you put a legend, you're putting cognitive overload, because now I'm looking at the legend, I'm looking at this. Is this cyan 5? Is this gray 4? Like, what am I looking at? Right? There's obviously one aspect of that, right? Which you can do bad color even if you have good white space, right? Or you can have no color and have bad white space. So they are not, you can still mess things up from that perspective. But the question you were asking, like, does white space and the concept of that, apply to multiple roles, especially in cybersecurity? We are designing products for, the SOC analyst, for the IT admin, for the CIO, the CSO. Um, so yes, it does still apply, because what is important to the CIO or the CSO? They need to look at information that is presented to them in a manner that is, grouped together, and basically just highlighting the most important thing that is relevant to them, right? Most of them care about, am I going to show up, on the front page of Wall Street, in a bad way or not, right? So you need to, like, highlight, things that they care about, right? What is the state of my health, my organization's health, my security health? The Aura Ring, right? They do an amazing job at that, right? So I don't know if you've ever seen the Aura Ring interface, because they give you very quick these donors, right? And it shows you immediately where you are, and it shows you a trend, it shows you the score, and it shows you whether you won a crown or not, right? So it's gamified, it's giving you clear information, and it's giving you a very quick, fast way of just looking at it, right? So it's a hook also, right? That's one of the fundamental things around design principles. So now let's go to the SOC analyst, right? What does the SOC analyst need to do? The SOC analyst need to analyze information. So they're the ones they potentially are dealing with really, really dense input, right? But this is where the microspace concept comes in. The microspace concept is, that everything is still in its own space, right? You're not overcrowding it. And then the other part that goes hand in hand with that is it's a disclosure, right? But use a progressive disclosure, right? So don't just don't just show everything up front, right? Because it's too overwhelming. It's non-actionable. It's too overwhelming. Right? So use progressive disclosure, especially nowadays with the use of AI and intelligence. Use those things to highlight what the analyst needs to dive into or break into and break it down at that point, right? Um, they don't need to look at this massive picture and try to see patterns for themselves. You have AI to do that, right? So gone are those days when you say, oh, show me the whole cluster, and because then I can see where the clusters are, and that helps me figure out where I want to dig in, right? No, you have automated tools to do that. You need to focus on, the detail now. So that's important. And then the third part is the IT admin or the system admin. So they need to do certain tasks, right? They're the ones who are taking action at the end, remediating things, which means they need to have a task-based approach, which means they need to have, you know, again, what is the most important thing they need to do? If they have to have 10 tasks, then lay out the tasks. As they finish those tasks, give them a gold star, gamify it a little bit, right? Again, you're feeling a sense of accomplishment. You're getting a nudge even, right? To say, because that makes you come back, right? And I'm going to add a fourth layer into this. And after you and I spoke, I was thinking about this. So we are always focusing on, cybersecurity dashboards and stuff from a cybersecurity product vendor perspective, right? But there is another persona here that is super, super important, and that is the end user. Because if the end user is not adopting good cybersecurity practices, then we have all failed. Right?
Interesting.
So making the end user experience, right? They're not looking at these dashboards we're talking about. They're interacting with the system, right? Whether that's MFA, whether that's asking for the correct entitlements or the rights to do their job, or asking for just enough entitlements. They have to do all those things. And the reason that a lot of problems happen is because we make it so hard, right? As an industry, we make it so hard. Security makes it so hard that people bypass things. And when you bypass things, then it causes vulnerabilities. And then now we have to create a whole bunch of products to look for those vulnerabilities. And so don't forget the end user who might not be the audience for your product because we're the dashboard on the other side of it, but they are a audience for cybersecurity best practice and adoption of security. They are an audience. I think so again, I'm gonna break it up into the different personas and the roles, right? So the cybersecurity industry, where it gets it wrong, again, I'm going to start with the the end users who are actually trying to do their jobs, right? For them, it's friction versus protection. So we make in the name of protection, we make the system so complex, right, that users bypass things, right? So helping them, make things more adaptive to them, make it more integrated into their workflow, that would make that adoption better, right? So I'll give you an example, right? And these are not meant to be any specific, focused on anybody specific, but just general examples. So take MFA adoption. MFA adoption used to be so hard, right? You have to have these little tokens, and you have to have all sorts of different things, and click on this and do this before something will happen, or match these pictures and stuff like that. I mean, it was a very problematic setup. So that has become much easier. And then, using pass keys and all of that is going to make that even better and more secure. Why do people not ask for, proper credentialing, right? Because they know that I have to fill out this form, I have to do this justification, it has to go through these approval processes. So I'm just going to use this other credential that I know has the right controls and access, right? So make that easier for your users. The other place, so now, come to the other side of that, on the, say, the CISO side, for example. So one of the things we still get wrong is that we give too much information, right? Instead of like helping the CISO, drill down um, when they need to drill down, we're giving them a dashboard that is, just all sorts of different information. What do they care about? They care about compliance. They care about risk. Right? So why am I showing the number of failed logins on a per user basis? That is not their job at all, right? So then we look at the SOC analyst, for example. So the SOC analyst, we give him too much information, right? Where everything is buried, and they're having to kind of look through that. You know what? They might as well open an Excel sheet and basically just use an Excel sheet, right? If I'm gonna give them so much information that they can't interact with it, or they can't, there's no progressive disclosure, there is no, sparseness of information, then what's the point? So those are still things that I believe we get wrong. I've seen so many dashboards where this so busy, right? Like things floating, moving, everything um, so trust comes from two different places, right? The first is that you have to have the right information, right? What is the efficacy of the information that you're trying to give somebody? If I tell somebody, um, you need to shut down this account, or you need to, close this valve, uh, how sure am I, right? So that's the first part. That's the quality of the data that is being used. So that's the first part. The second part is, am I able to present that information in a manner that is not confusing, right? So I'll give you two examples that are classic examples, right? These are classic design examples. So one was at the end of World War II, or during World War II, the especially the bombers, when they would return back after a run, um, and they would be coming into land, everything would be fine, and right before they touched down, they would retract their landing gear and this belly flop, right? And people kept saying, oh, this is a pilot error, and they're just, this is a pilot error. But then this psychologist, whose name I cannot remember right now, he looked at it and he identified the problem. The problem was that this is a high stakes situation. They're tense. There's stuff going on. And there were two levers next to the pilot seat. One was for flaps and one was for the landing gear. And the levers were right next to each other. And you're right at the minute of landing. You're looking out. You're not looking down. And they had to like change their flap setting. But as you're coming down, you have to change their flap setting. So they would accidentally grab the wrong lever, which would retract the gear right at the critical moment. So his solution was brilliant. It was very simple. He said, make the levers tactically different, right? So what they did was they put a rubberized circle on one of them that meant it was a wheel, and they put little arrows on the other one, like little wings on the other lever. These were the flaps. And now with your hand, you could put your hand down there and you could feel which one you were grabbing, and you would grab the right one. And the problem vanished overnight, right? So it wasn't a pilot problem. It was a design problem, right? So it was the other area where this happened was I think it might have been the 3 Mile accident, the nuclear plant accident, because again, this is a high stakes situation. They have so many different dials, alarms going on, and some valve was left in an open state that it shouldn't have been. But the visualization, the way the information was being presented, was not done in a manner that somebody could basically take action on that, right? So one is the data has to be correct, and two, you have to visually present the data in a manner that it is not confusing, right? It is clear. If you have something to say, make it super clear, right? Don't vary it. Don't, make it that it's ambiguous. Don't make it that they have to guess what you're trying to say. It has to be super, super clear. That one is a little bit challenging. Because if larger organizations is much easier for them to incorporate that, but even smaller organizations can do can get feedback, right? Incorporate feedback. They might not have the luxury or the time to do all the different usability testing, right? But you can still incorporate feedback, right? Because the important part is to see how your customers are using it, right? Don't pat yourself on the back. Ask your customer, hey, show me how you use this particular area. And if you see them struggling, or if you see them, doing something three ways, or if you see them opening multiple screens and cutting and pasting and copying, okay, they might not even realize it, because human beings are really resilient. We learn bad habits. So but just because they're able to do it doesn't mean that that you're helping, right? So observe, right? Ask your users to show me, what you're doing. Like, pick a small process. You don't have to like take all their day and say, oh, I'm going to follow you throughout the day, right? I mean, if they're willing to do it, do it. But and I've done that before when we were, long time ago, designing a clinical workstation. But yeah, ask your users for feedback. If you have the luxury, if you have users who are willing to do it, if you have the team to do multiple scenarios, have them do that. The concept of shift left, bring the usability or how somebody's using it, right? So if you're an analyst, that is going through a workflow and they're trying to understand that, move that back and have the development team and the engineering team and the design team look to see how they're using it, right? If somebody has to take the information out of your system and pop it into something else to be able to do their job, well, there's room for improvement right there. So having everybody understand that makes it easy, because sometimes people forget. They say, oh, well, that's easy, you can just export it, or you can just do this. Like, no, you're missing the point. And involve people in reviews, and ask for feedback, ask for looking at specific tasks. We call it it's a quality of improvement, a quality of life improvement, basically. If somebody doesn't have to do 6 clicks to do what they can do with 1 click, or they don't have to dig in just to get the answer they need, right? It's there. That's what they care about. From a design perspective, I think AI is going to make it easier, right? Because it's going to do a lot of the work that we don't have to worry about. So what we can do now is to surface just the information that somebody cares about, and go back to that, my whole concept of be sparse, and then let people drill down when they need to, right? And they can ask more progressive questions or progressive disclosure. The other thing that AI is going to do is to change, Gen AI especially is going to change our interactions. So what's the primary interaction we have with systems, right? We have these phalanges, and this is our interaction with the system, right? Keyboard is our primary interaction. Mouse, yes, but keyboard is the primary interaction. That is going to change. That's going to change to voice. So the way we interact with the system, and is going to change design, because I'm going to ask outcome based questions, and I need that outcome, and I might not want to click on it. I might just say, okay, yes, you're showing me this, now rotate this 90 degrees, right? But the interaction is going to change. It's going to get augmented, right? Which means that we can use other senses that we have and other mechanisms that we have of interacting, right? We're going to leverage those, right? And not just rely on the keyboard or on our fingers, and yeah.
Right.
So, and it's gonna make it easier for a lot of people who, might not be, able to use devices today, right? It's gonna open up new opportunities. It's gonna open new interactions. It's gonna open more people to interact with systems in a manner that is productive for them.